Hi guys! Today is our last video of the extension course and I will try to give you 10 basic tips for graffiti and street art. If you want to start with graffiti, you are supposed to start on a paper. I would say that you have seen some crazy wild styles and you would like to do something like that. But definitely you shouldn't start with a wild style. So the tip number 1 is related to what we have learned in the last video. Start with a basic shape, simple letters, okay? I know that you would like to do something like this. But I highly recommend to start with something like this. Okay, try to keep it simple as much as you can. And when you get some basic shapes, you can add shadows, etc. The second tip, guys, is about the colors, okay? In the beginnings of a graffiti career, forget about them. First of all, you need to come up with some good shapes and you don't need to waste your time with colors, okay? You just practice, try, and when you are going to think that your shapes are not that bad anymore, you can add color, okay? Now, tip number 3, find inspiration. Instagram is such a great tool for something like this. Just find some great artists, for example, with a hashtag graffiti or whatever, and you get your inspiration, okay? But gain inspiration doesn't mean you copy 100% of somebody else's work, okay? I know that it is hard, especially in the beginnings, but do not copy everything. Try to get some elements from somebody else's work. Try to understand what he or she does in that piece, and you get something from there, and you create yours, okay? And also, Instagram is such a great source of color inspiration. You can get beautiful color schemes over there, and I'm not talking just about graffiti artists. You can follow designers and lots of creative people, okay? Another thing, don't be afraid to admit that you gained inspiration from somebody else, because it's 100% okay about that. Tip number 4, start with a cheap supplies on a paper, not on the wall. Most of the time people paint with some professional expensive markers. For sure, expensive markers like this are much better than the cheap markers, but in your beginnings, try to use cheap markers. You are not going to spend that much money, and then when you are going to get a little bit better, go for it. Tip number 5 is about acrylic markers. This is refillable. I used to have problems with these markers all the time because when they are new, they are perfect. But then after a few weeks, this thing over here, I don't know the name of it, it's dry. And it's almost impossible to paint with it. I got a solution. The only thing that you need to do is to wash it. it back, pump it, and voila! This marker is just as a new one. I told you just a few seconds ago that I recommend to use cheap supplies, but on a paper. If you want to go out to paint your first graffiti piece ever, definitely don't try to buy the cheapest cans ever. Okay? No way. And also, you are supposed to get the graffiti cans. I don't want to say that you need to buy the most expensive can, for example, a Molotov, a Belton Molotov, and this acrylic is quite expensive, and I do not recommend to buy them for your first graffiti ever. Try to buy something like this or like this, okay? Because they are not so expensive and they are pretty good for graffiti. Let's move on to tip number 7. Learn the difference between caps. There are so many kinds of caps, but in general, you need to learn the difference between a fat cap, like this, and a skinny cap, like this. This is a fat cap. And this is a skinny cap. Can you see the difference? All the time people use fat caps for illegal graffiti because you need to be fast, and the skinny caps for the legal graffiti, the skinny caps for the outlines and the fine details, and fat caps for fills and backgrounds. It's important to have a good spray paint, but sometimes it's even more important to have a good cap. Another very common question is how to prevent drips. So tip number 8 is learn the speed and distance. You have drips in your piece because you are too slow or too close. This is the wrong style. Now this is how you should do it. You need to be fast and you need to learn the distance. It's about a hand distance from the wall. Here I'm going to show you what I know. Basically, this is addressed to beginners. just in case you don't know how to use a spray can. The way this works is the amount of pressure that you are applying on the cap. It will determine how much paint is coming out. Here I'm trying to demonstrate when you need to do a big line, you must be in the middle. So you move your body from one side to another side. If you go just one side, look, it's not going well. So you need to go to the middle and use your whole body to make a line, a big line. And also for a big curved line, you have to use your shoulder and your body. Stay really close to the wall, touching the wall with the can to have thin lines. Keep the cans away from the sun. If you keep them cold, you can have a thinner line. So, depending on the distance you have with your wall and the amount of pressure you are applying on the cap, you can have thin or thick lines. So press a tiny bit, then you get thin lines. And to get a thick lines, you need to press harder. Tip number 9, to find a good spot and learn the rules. It's definitely a good idea to practice your piece in the streets. So I highly recommend finding a legal wall or some abandoned building. But just as I said, you need to follow rules, because if you are going to do some super fast throw up in the middle of the piece of somebody else, no matter how good it is, she or he is not going to be happy at all. So try to find an empty space, buy a roller and the wall painting, color or black, and make a proper background. And another ruler is, take all your stuff with you, no trash at all. And finally, the last point, tip number 10 is practice. Without the hard work, you are never going to be a better graffiti artist. This is for any kind of thing, sports, everything. All right? Let me know what you think about my tips. Guys, I wasn't wearing a mask during my demonstration, but you must know the importance of wearing a mask, okay, during graffiti. So, especially if you're not using this kind of spray graffiti can, that is acrylic spray can, and watch the video now to understand the type of mask and how to use it.
Talk about masks. Now, when you hear somebody say, hey, you gotta wear a paint mask, really, it's not a mask. If you're wearing one of those little paper things over your face, that is called a mask, and that's simply for dust, basically, and that's why they're called a dust mask. When you're dealing with paint or any chemical for that matter, you need to be wearing what is called a respirator. A respirator goes a little bit further in the level of protection for when you're dealing with chemicals and paint especially. So I'm going to show you a few really quick tips to make sure that you get the right respirator and it works correctly to keep you safe. The first thing you want to look for when you go get a respirator is to see what it's actually designed for. So the easiest thing is I look for, because 3M is such a big company, I always know I can find their respirators pretty much anywhere. When I go down to the hardware store, I look for a 3M mask first. Then I look for, hey, what is it actually made for? And this one specifically says Paint Project Respirator. So that helps put me in the right direction. Now, you might see a few that say that, And then the next thing you're going to notice is that there's very minor differences, and actually most of the differences you can't notice, but you kind of need to know what to look for. Usually you'll see a difference in about $10. A respirator usually starts around $20 and goes up to anywhere from like $35 to $40. Really, usually the difference is the cartridges are usually the same, but they usually have what are called pre-filters on them. Now, this mask actually came with pre-filters, but I wanted to show you what it looks like without pre-filters on, because this is what you're most likely going to see when you go to the hardware store. This mask has simply the cartridges. And is this safe to use? Absolutely, no problem. All a pre-filter is a piece that goes on the outside of this piece and actually works like a dust mask, like I talked about before. But it works like a dust mask on top of the actual filter, so it keeps most of the particulates out of the filter, and the filter can really just deal specifically with the chemical vapors. Now, what it really does is when you have a pre-filter, your mask will last longer because it doesn't get all gummed up with particulates, and you can change out the pre-filters. The next thing you want to look for is the size. Most of the respirators from 3M simply have the size right on the front, and actually it'll have a little letter here. It'll either say S, M, or L. And I'll show you in just a second to make sure that it fits correctly. But for most people, a medium is going to work. If you're a really big dude, maybe a large, but for the most part, medium and large, it's not going to make a huge Take this respirator out of the box, and let me show you what the actual pre-filters look like. So a lot of times the cartridges themselves will come sealed in a plastic bag or something like that. It has to do with what's actually in these filters. They last longer if they're sealed in an airtight container. So that's why they usually come separated and you just put them on. And they usually just twist on or whatever, and it's pretty simple. Next are these little things. And these are the pre-filters that I was talking about. These are literally like those little paper masks that you wear for sawdust and things like that. But what they do is they sit inside this little plastic piece, and then they sit on top of the vapor filters themselves. And these just snap on. So just like I said, you want to get a mask or a respirator that has these little pre-filters on it. Really for the main reason is because they'll last longer and you don't have to continuously change out these filters. Every time you change out your filters, you don't need to buy a new mask. But at $20, usually by the time that you go through one of these filters, your mask will be falling apart. But it just depends. The filters are definitely a little bit cheaper. They're about $10 as opposed to buying a whole new mask for $20 or $30. Next, let's talk about the fit of your respirator on your face. This is actually a trick I learned in the military, but all you really have to do to make sure that you have a good seal, and that's all you're really trying to do is get a good seal around this mouthpiece, is to cover up the intakes, suck in a little bit, and you should feel a little bit of a suction pressure on your face. Now, these pre-filters aren't airtight, so when you put your hand over them, a little bit of air seeps through, so it's not going to suck completely against your face, but you'll feel a little bit of suction. And as long as you feel a little bit of suction, it means that you have a good seal and that mask fits. So when I put my hand on the respirator and I suck in, I can feel the mask suck into my face just a little bit. That's how I know I have a good seal around here and this mask fits and is working properly. Talked about the fit of your mask and how you can basically tell if it's fitting correctly. Now, the next way to always know if your mask is actually working is while you're working with paint, you shouldn't smell the paint at all. Now, me being in the military, the way you can tell your mask isn't working in the gas chamber is if you smell tear gas and your eyes start to water up and you feel like you're going to suffocate and die. But if that happens while you're painting, then you're painting with the wrong stuff and you're definitely doing something wrong. But remember, you shouldn't smell any vapors when you're using a respirator. So if you do, it means something is not fitting correctly or your filters aren't on all the way and you need to stop and fix it. So those are the basics when it comes to using a paint respirator, and you always need to be using one of these, believe it or not, because when you're painting, the chemicals in paint are not going to affect you right now. They might make you feel dizzy or a little bit sick, but the real problems come years later, and professional painters always have problems years later that snuck up on them because they weren't wearing a mask their whole careers. So don't play around with paint. Seriously, it is pretty stinking dangerous stuff. And even if you've got a mask on, you should still well ventilate the area. That takes the workload off your mask. It'll not only last longer, but you still run a better chance of not inhaling fumes that might slip through the filters a little bit. Even the professionals, when they paint in a paint booth, the reason they're painting in a booth is actually to cut down on dust. Those booths are still ventilated usually, and they are sucking and pushing fresh air into them, but they have a bunch of filters on them to try to cut down on dust. But they usually are still ventilated. So even those guys inside of a booth are still trying to ventilate the vapors out of the booth. If you've got any questions, post them in the comments, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Tony D.
This is a great graffiti guidebook that we have lots of great examples and tags and elements, 3D block letters, very different styles, and here some combinations and variations. Here are some examples of how to combine shadows and 3D block letters. In this page we have some exercise to create shadow. Now you will see how to make some block letters. Look how to create 3D letters. Now we are going to see some different designs that we can add in our letters for the graffiti. We call this additional elements to create interest and fun.
Or additional elements. Over here we got a simple alphabet, ABC. There's nothing special about these letters. Right now we're gonna change that, but we're not gonna put some flow over there or change the shapes of the letters. We're gonna do it with additional elements. Just as I said in the previous point, these are the key areas of the letters and we are not gonna touch them. But when you look at these outer lines that are not that important and well, they are boring. Also, there are these empty spaces. So the first thing that we can do is to fill these spaces with some elements. What I like to do is to put these little squares into these places. let's say that I want to put something else over there. Boom, we got a little arrow over here. There are multiple kinds of arrows, but to be honest, I don't really like them over there. Another thing that I like to do is that I actually cut the letters in not so important parts. I make a line over here, and I take this part and see that. And I'm gonna do it also over here. I just slightly change the position of these parts and it looks better. But what about these long, boring lines? Let's put some elements over there. And boom, we filled these boring lines with this kind of element. But for sure you can also use something else. See? Or something like this. There are millions of possibilities.
Just take a look at the book. There are so many kinds of arrows, for example. Or of these additional elements. Also, there are things like style additions. Can make it like this, like this, like this, like this.
In the front row, kicking back old school tracks like damn. Can't get enough of this more like I don't even know where I am. Ooh, baby, get hyped to the beat, let's go, cause this is our jam. This is our jam. Let's go. Let me break it down right quick for my haters, my dictators and bad raiders. Since you never seem to get it right no more, then right no more. Kick back your feet and watch your back from perpetrators.
These are just super simple letters with the same flow, with same elements, and with a clearly visible key area.
Guys, this is my pleasure to show you a great work that I was invited to do in my school, the school that I'm working. And this is a sketch of the mural that I was invited to create. And it was wonderful to create this artwork. And then here I'm drawing on the wall with chalk, white chalk. It took 2 days to draw the whole wall, Saturday and Sunday. And when the wall was completed, I invited the students to paint. Then students from 7 to until 13 years old painted the mural, of course under my supervision and with the color chosen. And it was great, their contribution. And it took a week to paint. It was a wonderful experience working with the students. They were very excited and feeling honored to do that. Then I invited 3 graffiti artists to help me finalize the mural. It took 4 days and it was during summer. It was really hot. The sun during the summer is hard. This process was amazing. I have learned a lot with all of them. But from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. we were under the sun, working hard. Was really intense. By the end of the day, we were absolutely exhausted, but with a unique sense of accomplishment. Here I was tracing the design, drawing on the wall. They were helping me with this scissor elevator. Here we were using stencil to paint the school learner profiles. It's getting dark. Now watch the video that the school created for this mural called Nurturing Values. About Brazil, guys, graffiti is becoming more and more accepted by Brazilians. In 2011 was included a paragraph in the law that protects graffiti as a work of art. It says, it is not a crime to practice graffiti performed for the purpose of value public or private property if provided the owner consents. In Brazil, the practice of graffiti was incorporated in the late 70s, influenced by American artists But Brazilian artists went far beyond, valuing this art with the Brazilian touch, which is recognized nowadays among the best in the world. And some of our great examples are the twins with gêmeos, the skull, o crânio, and Nina Pandolfo. So now you are going to watch a short video about each one of them. Enjoy!
Meu nome é Gustavo Pandolfo.
Meu nome é Otávio.
Os gêmeos.
Coloquei a melhor roupa e as crianças mandei chamar. Tudo de banho tomado, penteado que é pra agradar. Seu doutor autoridade e o padre pra abençoar. Hoje vamos comer cinza que a Kombi mandou buscar. Bata logo essa chapa, Instagram pra denunciar. Lilás com a tag na testa e hashtag pra acompanhar. Um bombe e um trawap da ponte de lá pra cá. Lute contra este cinza que a Kombi mandou buscar. Nem ministro a presidenta com a cena vão concordar. Chega da vergonha alheia, não apeia de se rasgar. Coloquei a melhor roupa e as crianças mandei chamar. Não me deixe comer cinza que a Kombi mandou buscar. Quando Cosme e Damião por foi perguntar. Quando um de dois irmãos do todo foi questionar. Levou, foi costa na lata e a lata vai revidar. Hoje não vamos comer cinza que a Kombi mandou buscar.
And now that you already know a little more about the graffiti world, I launched a challenge for you. You will do a research on a Brazilian graffiti artist and choose an artwork. It doesn't have to be the prettiest, can be that provokes you more emotion of joy or sadness, or it could be also one that has a mix of interesting colors. Make your choice and write a short paragraph. Why did this artwork move you so much? I'm already curious about your choice. Many artists influenced others to start or resist repression, as it is a fact that there was a very difficult time for graffiti artists, a different scenario from today. Banksy, Jean-Michel Basquiat, os gêmeos, Obey, Binho Ribeiro, Zezão, and Kurt Wenner are well-known names both in Brazil and worldwide, thanks to the power of the art to surprise and innovate. Thinking about this concept and to show some of these talents, I'm going to review 15 Brazilian artists that you need to know and who knows, maybe recognize on the walls from now on. By the way, many of them can be found in the huge mural of Avenida 23 de Maio in São Paulo. Okay? And the MAAU, the Open Museum of Urban Art, for those who don't know, is located in the north zone of São Paulo. Just take a look. Number 1, Derlon. Painting the walls of Recife and now all over Brazil, Derlon leaves his mark with traces of woodcuts and popular art. Using few colors, he created a symbiosis of urban intervention with one of the main print media of popular culture. Number 2, Nove. On the streets since 1999, Nove makes use of digital and organic elements synchronized through geometric elements, which gain vibrant colors through the watercolor, which always runs in the background of his works. The artist also enhances his designs with other materials such as wood, metal, and fabrics. Number 3 is Toys. Thiago Toys. Abstract art, cubism, and surrealism influence Toys art, which portrays dreams through galaxies with infinite possibilities. The geometric shapes take on colors to portray, in a sensitive and particular way, the universe of someone who lives in the world of the moon. It is impossible not to be aware of this blue immensity. Number 4, Mari Pavanelli. Born in the city of Tupã, Mari is a self-taught plastic artist and found in graffiti a way to create and express herself. Always surrounded by flowers, she explores the feminine universe with drawings that portray women spread over the walls of São Paulo, especially in the Cambuci neighborhood. Number 5, Presto. If one day you are sad, look at some of Presto's art, which is harmonious, fun, and with striking characters. As a child, the São Paulo native collected comics, built toys, and imagined creatures now painted on the walls. Number 6, Alex Sena. Alex's minimalist designs carry a unique lightness, forming unmistakable lines. The artist's simple black and white lines, who are colorblind, were influenced by comic books and illustrations, from which playful graffiti and strong popular appeal emerged, depicting human relationships with elements of children's imagination. 7. Arlene. Graduated in design, Arlene started his graffiti 18 years ago in São Paulo. The drawings are composed from the deconstruction of the metropolis architecture and technological influences, joining abstract forms to create a concrete image, alluding to a digital work which is actually painted. 8. Vermelho. Vermelho's art is made up of somewhat mechanical, diabolical, and angelical characters, who at the same time frighten, they also enchant. The paintings and the sculptures he creates have an amusing, mysterious, and dark air, giving the impression that they came from a cartoon a la Tim Burton to the city walls. 9. Mundano. Many people know Mundano because of his renowned work with wagon drivers, Pimp My Carroça. Activist, he embraced the cause of recycled material collectors and constantly collaborates with the category, so important for the city. He has been painting the walls for 7 years, always manifesting himself, including the water crisis in his provocations, as we can see. 10. Rodrigo Branco. With strong features, Rodrigo discovered over time an unusual way to express himself, depicting characters somewhat messy. The artist from São Paulo learned about graffiti in his adolescence and immersed himself in the arts under the influence of his father, even exhibiting his works in several countries. 11. Magrela. Magrela was raised in the urban art den, Vila Madalena, and had early contact with the fine arts thanks to her father, who painted canvases. With drawings around the world, the artist is inspired by the daily life of São Paulo and travels through themes that talk about the mixture of Brazilian culture. 12. William Mofus. Artist and specialized photographer, William Mofus was born and raised in São Bernardo do Campo and entered the artistic field under the influence of his older brother. Between painting, collage, and photography, he has done interesting work on the city walls, mostly in black and white, which now gain touches of color. 13. Enivo. Enivo's art has evolved a lot over time and has established itself among the great artists in São Paulo. The early start in 1998 brought a range of possibilities that remain open. Every time we see something new the artist produces, we know it's his, even if it's something completely different from any of his previous drawings, making them genuinely unique. 14. Veracidade. Although Mauro Neri does not live in São Paulo, his art is everywhere. He has been drawing on the walls of the city for many years. He always puts the signature with a big double meaning, veracity. He currently has almost 1,000 graffiti between Brazil and Italy, carries out social and educational work, always involving art. And finally, number 15, Kaduman. Visual artist Cadu Mendonça from São Paulo decorates the city with his colorful ethnic designs full of shapes and graphics that create a single image. Now let's see some images from the Open Museum of Urban Art in São Paulo.